Let me finish by pointing out one other thing. Who's the worst person to stand up to Donald Trump? It's Pierre Poilievre. He worships the man.
All right, elbows up. Elbows up.
Before we get started on this video, I just have one wish for you. I hope you have someone in your life that is as excited to see you as Mark Carney was to see Donald Trump.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
Something always brings me back to you.
You are a transformative president.
The merger of Canada and the United States. Come on, like
That wasn't where I was going.
Drown in your love and not feel your rain. Set me free.
thank you.
I don't wanna fall another moment into your gravity.
Mark Carney went down to Washington this week. We were all hoping that he would come back with the deal he promised. Here are 4 things you need to know about Mark Carney's visit with Donald Trump. Spoiler alert, he came home without a deal. The entire pitch by the Liberal Party for Canadians to vote for them was that they would solve this problem. He promised that he was the guy you hired in a crisis, that he knew how to negotiate, that he'd get a win for Canada. And remember, this isn't conservatives holding him to some unreasonable standard that we made up. This is the standard he set for himself.
If there's not a crisis, you wouldn't be seen. I am most useful. I'm honest. I'm most useful in crisis. I'm not that good at peacetime.
He could have been honest with Canadians and said, listen, I have no idea how to handle Donald Trump any more than the next guy, but I'll give it my best shot. That's not what he did. He looked every Canadian voter in the eye and he made a solemn vow that he would fix this, that he would get a deal by July 21st.
And yesterday, President Trump and I agreed to continue to pursue those negotiations, intensify them towards a deal within the coming 30 days.
It's now October and still no deal. Remember, during the election campaign, it was all about elbows up, and Mark Carney was going to be the tough guy that could negotiate a win with Donald Trump.
You are a transformative president. And I'm running out of time, but this is, in many respects, the most important.
The merger of Canada and the United States. Come on, like
That wasn't where I was going.
It's a good thing you don't need elbows to come home empty-handed. What could be worse than coming home without a deal? How about promising Donald Trump that you'll send $1 trillion of Canadian investments into the United States? I know it's hard to believe, but watch this clip.
We are the largest foreign investor in the United States. $500 billion in the last 5 years alone, probably $8 trillion in the next 5 years if we get the agreement that we expect to get.
$1 trillion of our money? Mark Carney is promising to send $1 trillion Canadian dollars into the United States to build factories, sawmills, auto plants there instead of here at home. Now, what's his defense? His defense is that it's going to be private sector money, not better. What that means is that he's going to create the conditions here to send investment dollars there. Mark Carney is either going to provide an incentive to Canadians who invest in the U.S. with either tax breaks or some other reward, or he's going to create the conditions here that actually drives out that investment. So, for example, he's keeping the production cap, the industrial carbon tax, the shipping ban, and all of Trudeau's tax hikes, basically saying to Canadian investors, you can't make a profit here, so put your money to work in the United States. And he actually offered to Donald Trump that his policies would increase the amount of money leaving Canada for the U.S. from $500 billion to $1 trillion.
Well, we now know why the U.S. president wanted this prime minister in power so badly. A weak leader whose high taxes and anti-development laws are sending billions of dollars and thousands of jobs out of this country. 86,000 jobs lost. And yesterday, the prime minister promised the president that he would increase Canadian investment in the U.S. by $1 trillion if he gets the agreement that he expects to get. Mr. Speaker, in exchange for $1 trillion of job losses in Canada, will he at least get an end to the U.S. auto tariffs that are killing jobs for our workers in Ontario? As the president said yesterday,
The Prime Minister of Canada is a tough negotiator. We will get a great deal.
Give me $1 trillion and even I will say something nice about this guy. I think we're beginning to see how it is that the president has been able to bulldoze over this prime minister. He won't even stand up when he is confronted by the Americans.
The third thing you need to know is not only was there not a deal in general, but specifically auto and lumber was left completely off the table. This is devastating news for every single auto worker. The U.S. has specifically said that there will be no deal that allows Canadian cars to be sold in the United States.
Can we make a deal with Canada?
I think it's really complex. I think this is really complex because they have been basically feeding off of us for decades upon decades upon decades, right? They have their socialist regime and it's basically feeding off of America. I mean, the president calls that out all the time. Why do we make cars in Canada? Why do we do our films in Canada? Come on. So I think the president's going to have, I think it's going to be a fascinating meeting. I'm glad I'm going to be there listening, but it's going to be a fascinating meeting tomorrow.
That was Trump's Commerce Secretary basically saying that Mark Carney has failed to protect Canada's auto sector. Already, production shifts are moving to the United States. Already, the big three automakers are making investment decisions and they are not choosing Canada because of Mark Carney's failure to do what he promised and to get a deal that protects Canadian auto workers. Meanwhile, there have already been devastating job losses in the lumber sector as punishing U.S. softwood lumber duties continue to hammer Canadian workers. Remember, the previous Conservative government was successful in negotiating a softwood lumber deal with both Republican and Democratic presidents. Now, before we keep going, I just need your help with something. The last few videos that I've posted have mysteriously capped out at about 28,000 views. Now, there's lots of theories about why this might be, but we're testing something here. Please like, subscribe, and specifically make a comment that you saw this part of the video. We're trying to get to the bottom of what's going on. And the last thing is the whole shift in tone. Remember during the election when Mark Carney said this?
And someone who worships Donald Trump will kneel down before him, not stand up to him.
Now that he doesn't need your votes, he kneels there like a pylon as the president skates circles around him, laughing and joking. Carney's smiling and winking as Donald Trump again makes jokes about Canada becoming the 51st state. He sits there and just takes it over and over again and actually seems to enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
Donald Trump is killing Canadian jobs and making jokes about annexation, and Mark Carney just sits there and laughs along with him.
You are a transformative president.
That's a hell of a compliment. But the ultimate conclusion to this trip is it all makes sense now. It is now abundantly clear why Donald Trump specifically wanted Mark Carney to be prime minister. Because Donald Trump gets whatever he wants with Carney in power. Mark Carney is keeping all the Trudeau-era policies that force Canadians to sell our energy at a discount, subsidizing the U.S. He's keeping in all the high tax regime that makes investors choose the U.S. instead of Canada. And he specifically promised Donald Trump $1 trillion more of investment. No wonder they get along so well together. Mark Carney got what he wanted. Donald Trump endorsed him and he won the election. And Donald Trump is getting what he wanted. $1 trillion of Canadian investment, putting Americans to work. You know, we started this off with a little bit of a joke about Mark Carney gushing over Donald Trump, but none of this is actually funny. Canadians are losing their jobs. That's so many people sitting around the dinner table not knowing how they're going to make their mortgage payment. It's dreams shattered and businesses going bankrupt. We need a conservative government that's going to fight for Canada, that's going to fight to get those investment dollars flowing to Canada to put Canadians to work.
Oh, yeah.
Commissioner, the charter jurisprudence based upon the Supreme Court's 2014 Spencer decision and the more recent 2024 Bykovitz decision is clear. Access to personal data requires prior judicial authorization, correct?
Yes, those were the findings of the court.
Okay, and looking at the Bykovitz decision, the court confirmed that subscriber data is, quote, the key to unlocking a person's identity and online activity, and based upon that, the court affirmed that even IP addresses attract a reasonable expectation of privacy and therefore cannot be obtained without a warrant, correct?
Well, that was a finding in that case. Again, the argument was this information is not specific enough, so we can ask and obtain it. And in the court really found that we can draw so much about individuals with these types of data points, and so in that case found that a warrant was required.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And to satisfy, in order to obtain a warrant or a production order in this type of context, the standard that would have to be met is reasonable belief. Is that correct?
Reasonable belief, there's some instances where under the law it will be reasonable suspicion. So I think that is where some of my recommendations are, to the effect that when we're talking about sensitive information, it should be reasonable belief. We should have a more rigorous standard to assess that.
Okay. So with that in mind, I want to ask you some questions about parts 14 and 15 of the Liberal government's Bill C-2, buried within the so-called Strong Borders Act, are sweeping new powers to government agencies to demand Internet subscriber data. For example, Section 487.0121 of the Criminal Code, the proposed section, would allow police and CSIS officers to demand customer information from any company providing public services, including banks, telecoms, and social media, on a mere suspicion without judicial authorization. Have I got that right?
Right.
Okay. So in terms of understanding the implications of what that section would enable law enforcement to do. Law enforcement, for example, could compel a bank without a warrant to reveal whether an individual is a client of a bank, how long they've been a client for, where they have accessed banking services, and provide the name of any person who has provided services to that individual. Is that fair?
I don't have the section in front of me, but that sounds right.
And it would provide warrantless access to subscriber data, including IP addresses.
Again,
right?
Sounds right.
That sounds right. And so it would seem to me that completely eviscerates the standards set out in Spencer and in Bajkowicz, right?
Well, it modifies it. Parliament can do that. The question is it necessary and appropriate? And so when we look at this, we ask questions about why is it suspicion and not belief? Is it rigorous enough? Is there enough reporting? These types of questions.
Yeah. But it raises serious privacy implications, does it not?
It has privacy implications. You're making it easier to obtain the data.
And do you have any concerns about that?
Well, again, I'm giving in advance the testimony that I'm going to be given to the committee when called on that specific bill. But certainly, what we've seen so far is we would have preference in it being reasonable belief as opposed to reasonable suspicion in some of those aspects because of the sensitivity of information. And so there are areas where the standard, in my view, should be higher.
And the standard would be higher, in your view, in this context?
Standard of reasonable belief as opposed to reasonable suspicion.
Well, and what about the ability for law enforcement to access sensitive personal information? I think you would concede the information that we're talking about here is sensitive personal information. You'd agree with that?
In many cases, it will be. In some cases, it may not be. But my point is, if we're talking about that sensitive information, the threshold should be higher. There's appropriate places for suspicion, but reasonable belief when we're talking about sensitive information is critical.
And
as a European, I am a European actually.
Oh, you are?
Yeah,
Oh.
Irish citizen. Yeah. So there you
welcome.
go.
Welcome.
Speaking as a European.
WTF. Here, here.
How many kids did you molest with Jeffrey Epstein?
More than just elbows.
And as the most European of the non-European countries,
being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you sought
What
to
possible
avoid.
conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Come on,
These are Muslim values. These are Canadian values.
Hi, everyone. Congratulations, you're spending more money on taxes than on food, clothing, and shelter combined.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
All right, gang, thank you all very much for watching. Aaron, Canadian Looney, like, share, subscribe. Smash that subscribe. We're trying to grow this thing. Canadian Federal Politics. Get yours right here. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next video.